Okay, let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we thank you so much for this day. Thank you for allowing us to start a new month. Help us to just, have that clean slate with you, to live for you, to just draw closer to you, to be better moms for your glory, Lord. Be with Dani as she shares tonight. As we close the series on discipline, fill her with your spirit. May it be your words spoken through her, Lord, and just continue to guide her and guide every mom present and all the children and families represented here tonight. Help us to just learn what you have for us and how to use, what modalities for your glory for each child, Lord, and just bless this topic tonight. In your name we pray, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right. Good evening, everyone. For those that don't know me so well, I'm a mother of two girls. My firstborn is nearly 5, should be 5 in December, and I have a 2.5-year-old. And I was very reluctant to share about this topic. Kelly and Lily know. I just felt, how can I say? I felt like I had too little experience to share with some of you who have older children than me. And I was like, this is not really my place to share. But then Kelly was like, I really want you to focus on the age group that you have. And I really want it to be practical. So it's basically your personal experience. And I thought, well, I think I can do that. So I really pray that you will benefit from this somehow. And that some of the things that I'll share here may be an idea of things that you could implement at home. I know quite a few of you have kids younger than mine. Some of you have kids around the same age. So I really pray it's a blessing to you. Now, before I begin, I want to give you a little bit about my background so that you understand where I'm coming from. So I was raised in a Christian home. I'm a 5th-generation Adventist, and I have, they're still alive, parents who really loved and feared God. And, growing up, discipline was always a strong point in our family for both my brother and I. And they did what they knew to the best of their abilities. And oftentimes we had harsh punishments and, privileges being taken away. And we even had spanking performed quite often. So usually one naturally follows the type of disciplinary procedure that you received from your parents, unless it's being traumatic, right? So in my mindset, before having children, I would think if my child misbehaves, she's going to get spanked. That's what you do. If a child misbehaves, they get spanked. And there was nothing wrong with that thought, I thought. Um, and it was interesting until I had my first child. And it's a lot different when you're holding your own baby and that thought comes to your mind. The day you disobey me, you're going to get spanked. And so I started to question some of that disciplinary procedure as being the main one. So here's what happened. The world nowadays is emphasizing the importance of love and the importance of connecting with their children. Now, our parents, and I say ours, mine and yours, most likely weren't raised with this mindset. This is a new era that's really, really pushing this idea that love is first, connecting and understanding the mind of the child, and less and less physical discipline. In fact, in some people believe it's just completely wrong. And I was introduced to this principle by a close friend of mine soon after my first child was born. And really, I got into reading some of those books that talked a lot about love and affection and connection. And I did gain something, but it just didn't seem to add up completely to the principles that we found in the inspired writings per se, like this godly disciplinary procedures, right? So basically where I'm coming from is affection and connection is important, right? And that's what I feel like I've gained from this time that I was studying this new principle. But I've also found that correction and submission is also very important. So obedience is the first lesson of character development, right? We've looked at discipline and obedience for the last 4 weeks. And there was a striking difference between these books like Child Guidance and the five love languages, or I don't know how many of you have read Jesus, the Gentle Parent, the Whole Brain Child. It was some of the things they did line up, but not everything. And Child Guidance, page 177, I want to read to you. It says, the parents have thought they love their children, but they have proved themselves their worst enemies. They have let evil go unrestrained, and they have allowed their children to cherish sin, which is like cherishing and petting a viper that will not only sting the victim who cherishes it, but all with whom he's connected with. So basically, with the intent of showing love to your children, too much love and very little discipline have allowed them to become their worst enemies. And I started to question, is this really the course that I want to pursue? And then Child Guidance 186 says, what kind of love is it that permits your child to develop traits of character that will make him and everyone else miserable? Away with such love. True love will look out for the present and internal good of the soul. Is this BMO? I don't think so. Anyhow, now, so somehow I started to see myself uncertain about my disciplinary procedures, right? Do I spank like my first intent was prior to having children? Do I put it on timeout? Do I do none of the above? Do I just talk to them? And it was an overwhelming feeling. My child by then was already over 1 year old. She was a sweet baby. Like she had a sweet spirit to her. Like no tantrums and nothing outstanding. But she was going through the normal phases of a baby. And I remember when she was about 18 months old, she started to manifest her wishes and her and protesting by pushing her friends or sometimes hitting. And I remember coming home and I would cry to my husband and I would say, I don't know where she's got this from. Like she's never been spanked in her life before. She's never been around children that hit. Where is this coming from? And it was an overwhelming feeling of how do I deal with this now? You know, the first idea was hit her back. She's not going to do this again. And I'm like, heavens no, she's going to learn that it hurts and she's going to do it more. Put her on timeout. And so I had all these questions in my mind. And I was already then pregnant of my second child. She was now 2 years old and she started to show some other signs of disrespect to us and to others. And so we decided that just repeating to her verbally over and over again, we don't do that, we don't hit, we don't push, we don't say this, we reply it like this, we don't take it from people, we don't say it's mine. And I felt like I'm all day just saying and saying and saying and saying these things. And I'm starting to get frustrated to the point that at times, sadly, I allowed myself to leash out to her. You know, when you're getting towards the end of the day, you've got your pregnancy hormones going, and you've got this child that needs to be constantly nagged for things to be done. And so I was being like pushed to my limit. Now fast forward, my second child was born, and that was really that's when things really got really bad, because thankfully she didn't show any signs of jealousy, but she basically lost her, you know, her grounds as being the only child and all the attention, and she started to protest and manifest her will through disobedience, like clear disobedience. You would give her a command and she would just give you the blank stare in the eye and not do it. And I would look at my husband like, what happened the last years of our life? I mean, what have I done for the last years of this child's life? And now what happened is, actually before my second child was born, I decided something has to be done. The whole talking is not working. So I thought there's one thing that I can do. The one thing that I can do is she hates to be alone. She's like an extreme people person and she hates to be alone. So I know a good punishment for her will be solitude, right? So we decided to set up her pack and play at the very end of the house. And I didn't want to do it in the crib because I didn't want her to get mixed messages um, about going to bed and not being a happy place. So I set up the peck and play at the very end of the house. And when I would get to my limit, like after talking to her 1,000 times during the day and couldn't do it anymore, and I would get to my limit, then I would walk with her all the way at the end of the house, put her in the peck and play, and walk away and leave her there for 2 minutes and hear her scream bloody murder. And that didn't work. That definitely didn't work. And that didn't work for many reasons. And the first reason was it wasn't enforced every time she disobeyed. I wasn't doing it every time that she broke the law or disobeyed. I was putting her there when I was reaching my limit and I couldn't deal with it anymore. And so evidently it wouldn't work. And second, it didn't work because she was stricken with fear by being there, put all by herself, and she didn't have an opportunity to think or to reflect about any of her wrongdoings. Basically, she was just desperate for somebody to come and rescue her from the punishment pit. And third, it didn't work because I had just recently potty trained her, and she quickly learned that if she screamed, potty, 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 I would go running like a chicken with no head to rescue her out of the pack and play so she wouldn't pee the pack and play. And so we were playing these games. Like when I get to my limit, I'll shove you in there, I'll close the door and walk away, hear you scream bloody murder until you start screaming potty, potty, and I'll come and rescue out of it. And it was ridiculous, really ridiculous. Well, I didn't have much time to be going there all day, putting her on the peck and play, and this is why I didn't do it. And when my second child came, I had even less time to enforce that punishment because how do you keep walking back and forth from all the way at the end of the house when you have a newborn and you're strapped to the couch nursing all day long? So it wasn't going well. It really wasn't going well. So I was quite frustrated. You have a baby and you've got this toddler that doesn't listen. It started to become a real concern to me. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not like we let her just do whatever she wanted. She was being verbally corrected. Every time she misbehaved, we pointed out the mistake and told her we don't do this and that. But that was just not enough. It wasn't working anymore. And then what now? What now? What do you do next? So that's when a friend of mine recommended me a book. And I believe it was God led because she accidentally ran into this book at a Google Drive and she was going through the same issues with her daughter, which is close in age with mine. And she said, I just started reading this book. I'm probably like on the second chapter, but it's transforming my parenting experience. And I said, I'll take it. I'll take anything right now. And so she gave me the name of the book. It was digital. So that same evening, I started to read it. And so I read the first chapter and I told my husband, we've got to read this together because this book is like, it's just falling from heaven at our home right now. So this book was written in 1871 by a writer named Jacob Abbott, and it's called Gentle Measures in the Management and Training of the Young. Now, this was the turning point of my parenting experience, right? So until then, I had a lot of principles that I had learned from reading Child Guidance and Adventist Home. And these principles weighed very heavily in my mind as to this is what a Christian home should have as of a child, right? But these principles weren't practical to me. Like I would read, a child should never gain advantage over the mother. And I'm thinking, how do you make this practical in practical life? And basically this book for me was the combining of my two worlds. So it was a strong desire. I had a strong desire to have a submissive child, but without having to resort to harshness, to blow-ups, or to the constant use of physical punishment, right? So I will not expand too much on this book because I really think that every parent should read it. But basically, it's a book that talks about how a parent must and can enforce complete and willing submission without submission to authority by using gentle measures. So that's basically the summary of this book. The whole book talks about complete and willing submission to authority. Like, it doesn't diminish your authority by no means. It does not excuse disobedience, but it makes it in such a practical way that you can learn to deal with the issues that rise up with different children at different ages, and how to implement systems of discipline that they will learn to submit to your authority without having to use harsh methods. And honestly, I think I've read the first 5 or 6 chapters, which is mainly for the age group that I am in right now with the kids, 4 times. Every time I read that, I gain again. And I keep telling my husband, you won't believe I read this again, and this is what I gained this week. Anyhow, so my husband and I decided to read the book together because I felt like this is an issue that we're both facing and we're together on this. So we better start reading this. And so every evening we would take turns. Every other night, it was a chapter of this book and a chapter of child guidance, because it says, this is a book, we don't know who the author is. We want to really make sure that this is lined up with the principles of child guidance, and we weren't able to find anything that differed from it. And so it was truly a blessing. And we were then in full agreement as to what our new strategy was in dealing with her. Now, I must say that the book Child Guidance says, actually, Adventist Home says, every Christian home should have rules, right? And I felt that at times the rules weren't so clear to her that she didn't know what to expect. Other times it was just plain rebellion, but there were times when I will give the link to the book. There is actually an audiobook, and there is the book itself online. There were times that I felt like it was lack of having proper rules that she could understand what our expectations were of her. And so we started to implement some rules. I was able to remember some of them and write them down this morning. But children that have no boundaries, they live very insecure. That's what I've learned. And that children who are allowed to have their own way, they're not happy. This is actually a statement from Child Guidance, page 213. Children who are allowed to have their own way, they are not happy. And these rules should be few and well considered. And once they're made, they should be enforced. Page 323 of the same book. Now, what are the rules that we implemented? We implemented about 6 different rules. Number 1 was respect to God. Under respect to God was reverence during prayer, reverence during family worship, and reverence in church. She was all over the place. We would ask her to sit, she wouldn't sit. We would ask her to sing, she wouldn't sing. She would bring the doll, get rid of the doll. It was like a nightmare. So that was the first rule, reverence to God, and that includes family worship, church, as well as praying. Number 2, respect to authority. First, command obedience and unquestionable obedience. And I'm going to open up more on this later, but that was the second rule. Respect to authority, first command obedience and unquestionable obedience. Number 3, respect to others. And that involved greeting back when greeted, and I'll get to this later, sharing, no verbal or physical aggression. And under verbal, there was this is mine, right? This is mine, this is mine. So that was a verbal aggression under the rules. Number 4 was self-respect, just general health principles. You're going to eat whatever we give you because we know what's best for your health. You have to drink water at certain times of the day right after you wake up, exercise daily. When it's time to sleep, it's time to sleep. And when it's time for reflection, it's time for reflection, which we call quiet time that we do here every day. Number 5, work before play. And this was implemented later when she was older, that every day we're going to play after the work is done. This is a rule. There's no questioning it because it's a rule and you know that it needs to be followed. And number 6 was general politeness. The words like please, sorry, excuse me, and thank you, and may I have, may I please, may I walk, may I touch. There's no I want water, I want to play, I want to sleep. It's may I please do this, may I please do that. So those were the six general rules. Now, the second step after creating the rules was to establish disciplinary procedures that would put to practice the principle of correcting 100% of the time. And this is where I found my parenting my parenting style to fail constantly, because if you only correct 60% of the time and give the child an opportunity to take advantage over you the other 40%, they're not learning to submit to your authority. They're just learning, oh, half the time mom is not going to do anything about it, so I can keep getting her boundaries pushed. And so Adventist Home, page 315 says, the mother allows misdemeanors to pass at one time for which she will severely punish at another. So they did something today, you don't do anything about it. Tomorrow they have to go to the punishment pit across the hallway and be there for 2 minutes crying bloody murder. So the children never know just what to expect and are tempted to see how far they can transgress with impunity. So if you allow them to get away with things, they start testing your boundaries. Child Guidance 283. The mother should not allow her child to gain an advantage over her in a single instance. So if you allow your child once to gain advantage over you, they will soon learn, I can do this to mom more often, and will continue to do it, right? So the disciplinary procedures that we implemented were disciplinary procedures that would help me to enforce some sort of punishment 100% of the time. And I won't say punishment, but I'll say correction, right? So I'll use the word correction for now. So there were 4 modes of discipline, and that's the meat of our talk today. The first mode of discipline was, I'm going to call it instruction, and it's a verbal correction, right? The second one, I'm going to open up more on each one of these as well. The second one were natural consequences. The third one was enforced consequences. Now, under the third one, enforced consequences, they could be related to the disobedience, or they can be non-related to the disobedience. And the fourth one was physical punishment. Now, developing on the first one, verbal instruction is used all day long. So it's not in a negative way, but that's simply the job of the parent, right? To give verbal instruction all day long. And this is part of disciplinary procedure. So kids forget things all day and they must be reminded. And this can be used alone when you know it's not clearly rebellion, but it still demands correction, right? And I'm going to give you some example. So the example number 1 that happens all the time here, I have my older putting away the silverware that comes out of the dishwasher, and she's there putting away silverware, and suddenly the spoon is in the mouth. And I mean, she's helping me. I'm not going to tell her, you go sit on timeout because you're putting the silverware in your mouth again. So it's constantly reminding her, Lila, remember that the silverware does not get put in the mouth. Otherwise, we have to wash it again. So now we have a box for silverware that went into the mouth, and you're going to have to rewash it. You know, so it's like verbal encouragement. Don't put the silverware in your mouth. Can you please sit correctly on your chair while you're eating dinner, or you're going to fall off? Wipe yourself from the front to the back. You're a girl, you have to wipe from the front. So this is all verbal instruction and correction that you're doing throughout the day. Wash your hands after the potty. Please flush the potty. Take your shoes off before coming into the house. And that was number 1. I was already doing that, but that's basically the only thing that I was doing, and it wasn't working. So then you move on to number 2. Number 2 are natural consequences. Natural consequences are the moments where life becomes the parent. You don't really have to do much, but most of the times just comfort your child. So a natural consequence is something that happens, and it's a lesson that nature will give them in response to disobedience. Example, a baby throws things on the floor that he's playing with. Gravity took care of the problem. It's on the floor now. You don't get to play with it anymore, right? A child that was told, do not climb the stairs because you're going to fall off. They climb the stairs and they fall off. They get hurt. That's a natural consequence. So your job as a parent is not to punish them on top of that, but it's to comfort them right now because nature already taught them a lesson, right? Later, when they're no longer in pain, you can talk with them and remind them, do you remember that mommy told you that if you climb up the stairs, you may fall. So next time, maybe you should listen to me so that you avoid getting hurt. But life already taught the lesson, right? A child that's told not to touch the stove, don't touch the stove, don't touch the stove, you're gonna get burned. One day they touch the stove, they get burned. There's no more lessons needed there, right? They burn their finger, they're gonna learn next time, stay away from the stove. This is the easiest one, right? A child that mistreats a toy, the toy breaks. Too bad, so sad. The toy is broken, you should have taken care of it. Life took care of the problem. So that's number 2. Now we're going to number 3. Number 3 is enforced consequences. And I'm going to talk about first enforced consequences that are related to the disobedience. So usually you can take advantage of the circumstance that was surrounding the disobedience and bring out a consequence that is related to it. So it doesn't require a whole lot of thinking, but it must be implemented 100% of the time. Because if you just do it 80, 85, it's not going to work. Here are my examples for you. Baby Lauren used to bite my nipples, and that hurts really bad. I'm sure whoever nursed here has had the same experience. What is the way that I could teach her? A natural consequence related to that: take it away from the nipple. You can't have this breast anymore. And whether they're going to be hungry for that breast at that time, they don't have it. And of course, aside from just taking it, you explain, you talk, you reinforce, it's not going to happen. A baby that's doing self-feeding, and I had that. I had my second child. She did not want to be fed. She only wanted to eat on her own. But then she learned throwing food off the high chair is real fun, because you can see it drop all the way down to the ground. And so I decided to tell her, if you throw the food down to the ground, you're telling mommy you want me to feed you. So if you do that, you lose your privilege to feed yourself. I'm going to feed you for the rest of the meal. And when you're done, you're going to go and pick up all the food that you threw on the ground. So it's it's not a natural consequence, but it's an enforced, but related to the crime. We'll call it a crime, right? So now I have Lauren. Lauren, she's always fallen asleep on her own, but sometimes she'll wake up in the middle of the night. I'll go and comfort her, and I'll put her down, and I'll tell her it's time to go to sleep. Don't make any more noise. Everybody else is asleep. And if she starts to cry and I know all her other needs have been met, I'll go back to her and I'll say, Lauren, you're keeping the whole family awake by crying. I'm going to have to close your door. That solves it immediately. She does not like to have her door completely shut. She wants her door open so she can still have a sense of closeness. And she would just beg not for the door not to close. And I'll tell her, I'll give you one more chance. If you want to stay quiet, I'll leave the door open. And that always, always works. And so that's a consequence related to the disobedience as well. My oldest was irreverent during prayer, and we kept trying and trying everything. It didn't work. And I told her, you are losing your privilege to pray on your own, kneeling down on your own, and mommy's going to have to hold you. So if I see any signs of irreverence during prayer, I'm going to have to pick you up and hold you. And they hate to be held like that, especially after they're 2. You know, they want freedom. And that solved. She learned that she needed to just be still, otherwise she's going to have to be picked up by mommy. And later it became the whole moving from one couch to the other, from daddy to mommy to the visitor to the other couch to the floor. And we're like, this is not really good behavior during prayer, during worship. So if you move from the one seat that you choose in the beginning of worship for no reason, then you're going to be grounded to the seat that mommy and daddy chooses for you. So lessons like that throughout the day, all day long. We had a problem with the second child saying it's mine. My first never did, but the second one, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine. And here at the house, nothing is mine. Everything is community toys, community clothes. It's everybody plays with everything. And so I created a box and I called that box, it's mine. And every time she would say, it's mine, the toy would go into that box and she couldn't have it. She couldn't have it for the rest of the day. And again, it's mine, the toy would go into the box until the end of the day. And they soon learn it's no longer mine, it's all ours, it's all a community. Now, we use a timer here for sharing things when they both want the same. And so we put the timer, whether it's a minute or 2 or 3. And it was always a drama because the little one, as soon as the timer would beep, she would hold on to that even harder. Like, you're not going to take this from me. And so we're like, how do you solve it? I already put the timer. It's not working. So the only solution is you're going to lose your turn for the next time. So if you give it willingly, like the other child cannot take it from your hand, whether it's a phone, a toy. So if you're holding it and the timer beeps, you have to willingly surrender it to the other child. If you delay or if you hold tight to it, you lose your next turn, which means the next child is going to have double time. Oh, that only had to happen like 3 times. And she learned, this is really disadvantageous to me. I do not want to do this anymore. And so that was another thing. Now, a child that's unwilling to be polite. I really had an issue with this. And, you know, maybe it's cultural, but I do have a problem when I say hi to somebody and the person does not reply. Like I don't find that to be very Christ-like. And so that was the last character trait I wanted my children to have, and I kept seeing that coming up on them. And I, especially my oldest, and I one day I had a talk with her and I said, you know, explain to her very nicely. And I said, I think starting today, I do not want to have to nag you to say hi to somebody in front of them, because that's how it was. The person would be like, hi, Lila. And she'd be like, you know, play. I used to tell my husband, play retarded, you know, that's what they do. And I'm like, I do not want to have to deal with you like that. And so if I have to ask you once to say hi back to somebody else, you're telling me you don't want to be around the people. You don't want to be around other people. You want to be home. So we're going to have to stay home. And that happened. I was at the store with her and somebody came and said hi and she didn't reply and I came back home. Didn't do my shopping. It was not a good thing for me, but I said I don't wish to have to do this very often. So we drove back home and I told her, unfortunately, you won't be able to come with mommy anymore. So when daddy comes home, I will go to the store with your sister. Oh, the world collapsed, you know, because the sister could go to the store and she could not. And that solved for about 2 months. And about 2 months later, we were out on a walk. It was a Sabbath afternoon. It was my husband, her, and the two kids. I mean, my husband, myself, and the two kids. And we were out walking, and this lady from church, I mean, somebody that she was quite familiar with, crossed us on the road and she was like, hi, Lila. No response. And I'm like, oh, Lord. And so I'm like, she's saying hi to you, sweetie. I was like, I'm going to give her a benefit of the doubt. Today is Sabbath. I'm going to be real nice, you know? And she's just like plain, plain disrespect, you know, like no answer. So the lady leaves and I tell my husband, I said, you know, I think we need to go back home. And he said, why is that? And I was like, well, we have an agreement that if she does not respond to people's greetings, she's telling me that she wants to be home. And so let's go home. So we all turned around. And as we were taking a few steps home, he said, come here, let me talk to you. So I went over to her and he's like, you know, I find it unfair to her sister that she has to go back home because she said hi. And I said, well, you're right. I'll take her home. And that was the real lesson. Daddy got on a Sabbath afternoon to go for a walk alone with the younger child, and she had to walk home with me. And mind you, we used to have a double stroller, and he took the stroller. She had to walk home with me. And I told her, you know, she cried on the way home, and I told her, I'm not going to make your life miserable. When we get home, you can choose what we want to play together, but that's where you need to be. Until you learn to be polite, we can't leave again like that. And you know, there are days, you know, children have their days like adults, but I would say 90% of the times I do not have to remind her because she knows the consequence will be stay at home. And she's not like that. She's just selective, I guess. And that was the part that bothers me. You are a people person. You are friendly. Why are you being selective? And it was not shyness, which is a completely different story. So that was the lesson on staying home for not greeting others. Now, I started to see ugly things coming out of her mouth. There was one time I was driving home and she was being rowdy in the back seat. And I was like, Lila, sweetie, we don't scream in the car. And she just kept screaming, like not like it wasn't a protest. It was just an annoying scream. But it was annoying, like really annoying. And I'm like, sweetie, we don't scream in the car. And I remember I said it like 3 times until I looked back and I said, Lila, basta. That means that's enough, right? In several languages. So I said, Lila, basta. And she looked at me and she said, you basta. And I was like, okay. Had never seen that come out of her mouth. She was about 3, I think. So when we got home, I was like, Lord, how do I solve this? I remember my mom lighting up a match and putting it close to my tongue and saying, I'm going to burn it because there are things there that shouldn't be, but I definitely don't want to go that route. And I prayed and the Lord reminded me, soap, bar soap. And I said, oh, bar soap. So we went to the bathroom. I said, come with me. So she came and I said, do you remember we were in the car and you said this to me? Yes, I do. And I said, okay. I want you to know that that's very disrespectful, extremely disrespectful. And I don't want to hear that ever again coming out of your mouth. And she was like, okay. Like I saw there was no repentance. Like, okay. And I said, so my job as a mother is to help you. And I'm here to help you remember to never again do this to me. And she said, what are you going to do? And I says, well, your mouth is dirty and we need to wash it. And she's like, wash my mouth? And I said, yes. So you're going to stick your tongue out and I'm going to rub the bar soap like Dove in your tongue and all that's dirty is going to come off. And she was like, mm-mm. And I said, well, you have two options. You stick your tongue out willingly, or mommy's going to have to stick it out for you. And I really don't want to do that because it hurts. And so she, she stuck her tongue out like this far. And I rubbed the Dove until it was all white. And I said, now you can wash all those ugly words off. And she was there in the bathroom, and you can't get soap taste out of your mouth. It's bad and it stays. And it's solved. I've had to use the soap, I think, about 4 times when different things came up, but I didn't wait until it got to me. I only waited until it came out once. So this came out, that gets washed. This came out, that gets washed. Until I started to see that that wasn't really working anymore. Like it was working in the sense I won't do it, but I wasn't seeing a real heart repentance until just this year I had another idea. If no sweet things come out of your mouth, no sweet things can go inside the mouth. And now that she's 4 and she's more able to eat desserts, back then it was pretty much controlled, no sugar or very little sugar. Now she feels it really, really bad. And so the whole family will be eating a piece of pie for dessert. And you may not have this today because sweet things cannot go into mouths that no sweet things are coming out of. So these consequences, if you're consistent and if you're daily enforcing them, no matter how many times a day, they learn quickly who's in control. And they learn that the more they test you, the more privileges they lose or the more consequences they're going to have. If a child takes too long to get ready for bed, I've had this happen many times, you're not going to get your bedtime story tonight. There's no time. The clock is saying 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock is time to be asleep. If you take too long to put your toys away or you don't come when mommy calls you for the bath, no bedtime story. If you're not following instructions on a walk, we walk a lot here on the campus and cars are driving by all the time. So I tell my little one, if I call you once and you don't come, it's not safe for me to leave you off the stroller. You're going to have to be strapped the entire walk. And that may be an hour and a half, and she's just strapped to the stroller. The next day, her ears are this big. She's listening to any command that you give her because she doesn't want to be strapped to the stroller when her sister is out walking. We actually had to use some of this disciplinary procedure even with potty training. My husband had the idea of rinsing them off with cold water. Now, mind you, this is not the first day of potty training or even the first week. It was, you teach them, you enforce them. And when we started to see her holding it, purposely holding it because they don't want to stop what they're doing to go to the bathroom and then pee their pants, then we would tell her, well, when we pee our pants, we have to get washed with cold water. That's just the rule. And I mean, who wants to get their little bottoms washed with cold water? So that quickly got to them and they learned. Not coming when mommy calls for food, then you have to sit down until the plate is finished. Now we have a rule here. We only get off the table when you're done eating. But when you're at people's homes and people are birthday parties or things and you're like trying to feed your children and they're playing, we have a rule. If I call you and I have your food on the fork and you don't come, I'm gonna find a chair for you and you're only gonna be able to get off this chair when your plate is finished because I'm not gonna be screaming in this birthday party trying to get you to come back to me. If you don't ask for something politely, you get reminded once. If they say in the table, I want water, I usually just go, excuse me. If they say, I want water, you don't get water that meal. But if they quickly remember and be like, and it's funny because my little one even changes her tone of the voice. She'll go, Mommy, is it okay if I have some water, please? Because I think they gain points like that. I don't know how their little brain works. And so, of course, you may have it. So for politeness, I always give them the benefit of forgetfulness, right? Did you forget by any chance how to ask for things? So you get one chance. And if you ask them politely again, you're not going to get it. It could be water, it could be more food, it could be dessert, it could be whatever you want. If you're unhappy and grumpy, and all your needs have been met, then you have to go to your room And when you are happy and you can sing a happy tune, then you can come out of your room. And I've had to do that many times. They just wake up sometimes on a bad mood. And if they don't get sent back to the room and come out singing, it will drag on for the entire morning. If you're unwilling to dress according to the weather, you got to stay inside. My little one used to take all her clothes off except for the bare necessities in the dead of winter. Like, don't want to wear a jacket, don't want to wear a hat, don't want to wear gloves. And it was a war. Put on your hat, put on your gloves, put on your jacket, don't zip it down. Until one day I said, that's enough. So you don't want to wear your jacket, no problem. You're going back inside. And I put her inside. She couldn't reach the door latch yet and she couldn't come out. And I had a friend here at the house and she was just like, what's going on? And I said, I'll be back in a few minutes. And when I came back, and I was like, do you want to wear your clothes now? Do you want to come out? And she was almost getting dressed on her own to go. She could hardly stand up, but she was managing to put her arms through the sweater to be able to go outside again. If you are unwilling to eat what's served in this meal, no problem, we're gonna give it to you the next meal. Just save it, put it in a little container, and before you have the next meal, this is what your leftovers were from the previous meal. I mean, it was a little amount, it wasn't a huge plate, you're just simply being picky, and you just can't be picky when mommy gives something to you and you know that that's the best for them. If you're unwilling to help during chores, it's no problem, you lose your playtime. So you have chore time and you have playtime. When I'm playing with your sister, you're gonna be doing your chore. And that's like devastating. Now lately I've had the lazy coming up. And the older one started with the lazy and the little one is starting to copy. And the older one will be like, oh mommy, I don't want to put away the silverware because there are just too many. And I'm thinking, I didn't dirty up all this silverware by myself. And I'm like, are you tired? And she made the mistake of telling me, yes, I am. And I said, I could see that you're really tired. So I want you to go to your room and you can lay in bed for 15 minutes so you can get all rested up. I mean, that's the worst punishment you could give to her because she wants to be around you. It only happened twice. She did that twice. She had to go to her room, stay there the whole 15 minutes, set her timer. Never again she complained about putting the silverware. And doesn't matter how many there are. The only thing she says now, she says, if by any chance there are too many, could you please help me? Yes, I will help you, but you gotta be willing to do it, right? Now, a child that's young to complain that's lazy, like her, lazy for what? Tired of what? Tired of playing must be. So they get this punishment. You go to bed and you rest. Rest your not needed rested body. But as an older child, an idea would be, you don't have to help me today, but you're gonna have to fight for yourself today. So you're responsible for your own food. You're responsible for your own clothing. You're responsible for your own rights. So if you need to do anything today, you don't have to help me, but mommy won't be able to help you either. And they're gonna panic. I mean, how does a 8-year-old will find food for herself and rides and everything, clothing, clean clothes. And so it's a lesson that you can give to them that way. Now, I can go on, the list goes on, pushing buttons on the phone while on FaceTime. You're talking to grandma on FaceTime. If you start pushing buttons, mommy has to hold the phone. That's a huge punishment because they want to hold it. They want to have control. But if you start pushing buttons, you're going to lose your privilege. And I've had, numerous amounts of times that they've had to lose the privilege. My little one now, it's in the stage of wanting to change her clothes like 10 times a day. She gets to choose what she wears in the morning, and we're only going to change that at bath time unless there is an emergency. Of course, if she's dirty, spilled, peed, or pooped, whatever. But I'll be in the kitchen and she shows up with a whole new different outfit. And I'm like, what happened here? And I go into the room, the drawers are a disaster and there's clothes laying all around. So I told her, we're starting a new rule here. You're going to change your clothes once in the morning. You chose it, you change it. If I see you wearing different clothes throughout the day, tomorrow you lose the chance of choosing what you were going to wear. Mommy's going to have to choose for you. And she hates that because mommy's going to choose. Anyway, so these are the enforced related consequences. I think I've given you enough examples that you can get some ideas from. And Child Guidance 273, it says a child should be so trained that a refusal would be received in the right spirit and accepted as final. And I recently had an experience at a friend's house, and I'm going to briefly share it. We got invited to go to a friend's house just 2 weeks ago. And it was in the afternoon, and my child said, my oldest said, Mommy, are we going to eat there? And I said, she hasn't mentioned anything about food. Neither are we going to mention. And I said, but we're leaving the house at 4. If she does not say anything about eating there, we're coming home at 5:30. She has a watch. She knows her time. So there's no drama. So if she doesn't say anything about food, we're coming home at 5:30 because we need to get the Bed and Bath and Beyond is what we call our bedtime routine here. So Bed and Bath and Beyond starts at 5:30. We need to be home by then. And I said, but if she offers us any food, we can stay until 6:30 because we only need to come home and bathe and be ready for worship. And she said, okay. And immediately I thought, I better add to this that we are not going to ask to stay for food or give any hints or suggestions because I know that's just what she's going to do. I want to stay for food. I'm going to make a suggestion, right? So I said, and remember, we don't ask to eat at people's homes. We wait until we are invited and we don't make hints or things here and there. Oh, okay. So we went and she's playing with this child and everything. And my littlest had to go to the bathroom. So I left to go to the bathroom. And when I come back, it was around 5 o'clock. When I come back, my oldest looks at me right in front of the child and the child's mother and says, Mommy, is it almost time to eat yet? And I'm like, this is it. So I looked at her and I said, you know what? It's not almost time to eat yet, but it is. And I gave her the big eye. It is almost time for us to leave because remember, we're going at 5:30. And then my friend said, oh, don't you want to stay for supper? And I was like, I can't do this. I can't because I'm just going to be giving into her little hint, hint. So I looked at her and I gave her the big eye and I said, you know what? Today we really have to be home early. The kids went to bed so late yesterday. They need to be in bed early today. We can plan another time, but not today. And my child, she just swallowed that. She didn't ask, why not? Why can't we? Just when we got to the car and I closed the door, she said, that's too bad that we can stay here today for dinner, right? And I said, it really is too bad because you did have the opportunity, but you missed it. You would have had the opportunity if you had kept your mouth shut, but because you said it, you lost a chance. So we have to go home. I'm sorry that happened to you. And when we got home, she said, that wasn't very nice. I don't want to do that again. And I said, thank you. And I almost I felt reluctant to punish her on something that I wasn't there to make sure that it wasn't mentioned to her. But I just had that motherly instinct. I bet you this kid is setting herself up for dinner without being invited because she knew she couldn't say it openly. Anyway, so just little things here and there. Now, number 3, unforced, unrelated consequences. Now, this is where I think it requires a place in the house where the child can sit up straight with no toys and think about how to improve that behavior. And I think it was Betty recently that was talking about it, having a place where the child has to sit up straight with her back straight to it. And I'm going to share screen. We have a place like that at the house. And I'm going to share you my preview. And this is what it looks like. She's got to sit right next to the fireplace, no toys, no books, and you determine how long they have to be there for. Now, when do I use this? The reason why we have resorted to using the living room is because my intention is not to treat them like I started out with my first, in a room far away so you can be punished. I wanted them to think. And this is actually what we call it. It's called cantinho do pensamento, which means the thinking corner. So if you do something wrong that there is no immediate or related punishment to it, this is where you're going to sit so you can think of what you can do better. And this is the question I always ask them. When I go retrieve them from the cantinho do pensamento, I always ask them, well, she says, I'm sorry. And when she says, I'm sorry, I always ask, what are you sorry for? I'm sorry that I interrupted you so many times when you're trying to speak. Okay, and how can you do better next time? Well, I can say, excuse me once, and I can wait patiently. So that's always the dialogue. What are you sorry for and what you can do better next time? So this seat, for me, It shows that it's not the severity of the punishment that will teach the child submission, but it's the surety that it will always come. And I want you to remember this, because sometimes we think for us to achieve good results, we have to be severe. And it's not really what it is. So if the punishment is always sure to come, then the child will be submissive because they know that there will be a consequence. And the best example I can give you is the fire. Why are we intimidated by fire? Because it's 100% of the time that you play with fire, you're going to get burned. This is why we're intimidated, because it doesn't play with you. Sometimes you'll get burned, sometimes you will not. And this is why children are also intimidated by fire, because it's the surety that they will always get burned that makes them respect fire. It's the surety that they will always be punished when there is misbehavior that will make a child respect you. It doesn't matter how harsh, the punishment does not have to be very harsh. And for that, I have a quote. Child Guidance, page 36. Ask the gardener by what process he makes every branch and leaf to flourish so beautifully and to develop in symmetry and loveliness. He will tell you that it was by no rude touch, no violent effort, for this would only break the delicate stem. It was by little attentions, often repeated. So if she interrupts others when we're speaking, that's where she goes. If they're being rowdy, that's where they go. If they're not listening to first command, mommy called you, you didn't come, that's where you're gonna go. Uh, it's a potty break, please go to the potty. If you don't go immediately, you're gonna go sit in the pensamento. Or if they reply no when given a command, Child Guidance, page 86 says require prompt and perfect obedience. So if you give a child a command and they look at you and they say no, this is playing disrespect, right? So you're gonna have to sit here and think about a better way that you could reply to me next time. And if they touch things, they're not allowed. Here we have heaters, on and off, on and off. You gotta go sit on the thinking time. And you have dishwashers. I have my littlest one. She had this phase where she would walk and turn on the dishwasher. Every 10 minutes, I'm like, this dishwasher is running again. And it was the little one again. So she had to go and sit, pulling the toilet paper, playing with water, touching phones when they're not supposed to, and etc. And of course, being grounded, I think that works for older children. If you are obedient today, you're going to have such and such privilege. You can use inducements, but if you don't do this, you're going to have to stay home. So last but not least, physical punishment, right? I am going to tell you my experience with physical punishment, and I am not here to tell you this is the only and best or I have this under control, but this is the experience we've had. With all that being said, I'm a strong believer of the rod of discipline, but the rod of discipline for me is not merely the spanking rod, but it's the guiding rod, the correcting, the instructing, and the protecting rod. Now we know in Proverbs 22:15, it says, foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. I was spanked as a child many times, and I even remember times when it wasn't conducted the best way possible. I'm not traumatized by it, and I have a good relationship with my parents. I see many godly families that have used spanking often, and they have had success in training their children. And I find that there is a fine line to know when spanking is appropriate and requires a lot more tact than any other mode of discipline. Now, the experience I've had with both of our kids is that if we are consistent, which means consequence anytime there is a disobedience, and that we are earnestly praying for them and studying what works for them and not to discipline them, willing to change and implement new ideas, we haven't had to spank as a continual resort, right? So my 4-year-old, which is nearly 5, she'll be 5 in 2 months, she has been spanked twice in her life. The first time she was spanked, she was nearly 3. Her sister was a 5-month baby. And we were in a hotel room with my parents and my husband's parents in Brazil. And she was with my mom in the room. I wasn't there. And when I came back, my mom said that she slapped the baby in the belly. And she said, I couldn't tell if it was hard to tell whether it was a playful slap or if it was a serious slap, but it was hard enough the baby cried. And I told her not to do it, and she did it again. And she said, so I'm here to report it to you. And I said, well, that's not good. So I talked to my husband and he said, we need to talk to her. So he talked to her that evening and he said, Lila, this was well beyond the phase of hitting for disappointment. She had gotten over that and we had not seen hitting anymore. And he said, this is a safety issue because we have a baby in the house. And if we allow you to go hitting, uh, we can't trust you with the baby. And mommy can't be on top of you all the time. So we want you to fully understand hitting is unacceptable, whether playing or serious or jealousy. And she was not jealous of the sister, or she didn't reveal any jealousy. So for us, it was a little confusing why the hitting came. And so he said, no hitting allowed. And I'm here to tell you that if you hit anybody else, sister, friend, or anyone else, one more time, I'm going to have to spank you. And she was like, what is that? And he said, well, spanking, when mommy and dad explained to her what the spanking was. And I was like, okay, she's not going to do this again, right? The very next day, both sets of grandparents and us are at a friend's house. And this 1 year old is crawling, my friend's son, and she's crawling right next to the child. And just as they were walking right in front of us, she slaps the boy on the back 2 or 3 times. And I'm like, I looked at my mom and I could see my mom's eye. This is exactly what happened last night. So immediately I was like, my stomach starts to turn. And I looked over at my husband and he looks at me and he says, the time has come. And for me, that was like, judgment has set. So I'm like, oh no, what bad timing. I mean, we're out of home in somebody else's house with both sets of grandparents around. I mean, is this really? And for a moment, I started to question, is this really the right time? I mean, she's never been spanked before in her life. Is it really? But then I started to feel peace and I was like, this is it. The Lord has clearly given us the instruction. You gave her the warning, and this is a safety issue. We need to fix this before it gets to become a habit. So he took her to the room. It was right before lunch. And I'm like, just praying. And I was like, you're going to deal with this one. So he took her to the room and he had the whole godly spanking, as you can call, I guess, atmosphere. You pray, you explain, you reinforce, you pray again, you hug, and put your pants down and ba, ba, ba. And we could hear her scream bloody murder from across the house, right? And, my heart sank. It was the first time she was getting spanked. It was really sad. But you know what? It's never happened again. In fact, I told my husband, I said, the true test of whether she has learned this or not will be when her sister goes through the pushing and slapping phase at around 18 months. Because if she truly learned that she does not hit her sister back, she's not going to do it. And that's exactly what happened. Lauren went through the phase about a year ago that she was hitting the older one all the time. And she never hit her back, never pushed her back, never once. And this has been almost 2 years that happened. And she remembers to this day. Once I hit a little boy, she has no idea who the little boy is. Once I hit a little boy at his house and daddy had to spank me, and I will never again do that. And she repeats that 2 years later. And so it caused a strong impression in her to the point that she just knows this is completely out of control. And the second time she got spanked, it was by me. My parents had been visiting for 2 weeks. I do not have permissive parents. They respect the way we raise the kids, but just the fact that we have grandparents, it's complete different behavior, right? So they feel, I don't know, somehow they feel empowered that they have a backup plan. If mom and dad goes wrong, I have grandparents as a backup plan. And the behavior had gone down. The last week, my parents were here, and when they left, it only escalated. So I told my husband, she's suffering from grandparent withdrawal syndrome right now. And I'm going to give her 5 days to overcome that. If in 5 days she's still suffering from this, and I've tried everything that I could and it's not working, something has to be done. And I was fearful to say something has to be done, but the something was the physical punishment, because we had tried everything, didn't work. In fact, on the 5th day, it was so bad. It was like so bad. I totally felt like I lost control of her. She was almost 4 then. It was a couple months before 4. So it had been a year that she had been spanked. And I told my husband that morning, I said, today is the day. If I don't see any change, today is the day. And the girl that helps us, my friend that helps us clean here, she was here that day. And without me saying anything to her, she came to me and she said, "What happened to Lila today? I noticed that she's acting differently." And I said, "Well, I'm glad you noticed it too, because today is the judgment day." And I said, "And I'm going to take opportunity that you're here. Please stay with my little one for 15 minutes. I need 15 minutes alone with her." And I went into the room. It had been a terrible day. And I went into the room, and it was my first time doing it. And it was heartbreaking. And I hugged her and I said, "Lila, I love you, but something has to be done. I can't. We can't continue like this anymore." And I gave her all the reasons. And it wasn't like one specific thing, like the hitting. It was just how rebellion, just rebellion in all areas. She was protesting, she was challenging us, and she was not listening to instructions. She was replying back, and I was like, this is like rebellion, and it needs to be corrected. And so I spoke to her and I hugged her, and as soon as I hugged her, I started to pray. I started to cry, and that wasn't my intention. I didn't want her to be moved by my emotions, but I felt that somehow my tears softened her heart. And she started to wipe my tears and she said, "Why are you crying, Mommy?" And I said, "Because this makes me so sad. And I can only imagine how sad it makes Jesus." And I noticed then that her heart softened. But instead of being tempted to walk away from the corporal punishment, from the physical punishment, I was even more sure that that's what needed to happen, because she was ready for it then. I was reluctant to physically punish her because she was so stiff and harsh that I thought, this is going to do her no good. She's just going to get more angry and be more rebellious. But when she was soft, I knew that was the answer. It has to be today. It has to be right now. So I prayed with her, explained, and I had her pray. She was old enough to pray. And I spanked her and I left the room, and my friend saw me. I was just deformed, in tears and crying. And that was the only time. I've never again, she's nearly 5 now, it's been another whole year. Any signs of outward rebellion like that last as long as it lasted then. She has had her moments. I've gone close to needing to spank her, I think 2 other times. And I asked for prayers for a couple of friends, and a new idea would always come up when I didn't have to. So basically, my position with spanking is I cling to the quote that says, "As you bow before God with your child, you will present before the sympathizing Redeemer his own words. Suffer the little children to come unto me and forbid them not, for such is the kingdom of God." That prayer will bring angels to your side. Your child will not forget this experience, and the blessings of God will rest upon such instruction, leading him to Christ. When children realize that their parents are trying to help them, they will bend their energies in the right direction. She needs to understand, I'm here to help you be somebody else. Now, Child Guidance 250, this is actually the quote that I cling to. "Whipping may be necessary when other resorts fail. Yet, she should not use the rod if it's possible to avoid doing so." So if any other resort fails, that's when it should be used, but it shouldn't be used frequently. Some children are so vicious in their tempers that the infliction of pain is necessary, but very many cases are made much worse by this manner of discipline. Avoid it as much as possible. And so I would like to finish. I have some general tips I'm going to put on the band app, because I do not want to extend this any longer. But I want to conclude by saying, you can do your best and you can use all your strength and all your energy, but if you don't cling to the power of God, all your efforts are in vain. Because ideas, there are many out there, but your child is not a one size fits all. You have an individual soul in your hand that only Christ knows how to reach. And if we try by just reading books, by reading, I will say, even just reading child guidance, you're not going to learn the wisdom that comes directly from God to fit your single child that you have at home. And this is the experience I've had. Oftentimes, I find myself thinking of new ideas, thinking of new punishments. If they don't work, and in one moment that you kneel down in prayer, the Lord gives you an idea that one time you implement, problem has been solved. And so it's time on your knees. When you pray, you tap into the ultimate power of God. And he sends his angels to aid the mother in doing more than we can imagine. In fact, Adventist homepage 204 says, he knows the burdens of every mother's heart and is her best friend in every emergency. His everlasting arms support the God-fearing, faithful mother. So when I feel discouraged and I'm a failure at parenting, when I don't understand why my kids keep doing on that, his everlasting arms will lift up my arms because he's there for me and he knows my burdens. Now, here's a promise for you. It's not so very good promising, but difficulties will arise. It doesn't matter how old your child is. Difficulties will arise. You will meet with obstacles, but look constantly to Jesus. When an emergency arises, ask, Lord, what shall I do? If you refuse to fret or scold, the Lord will show you the way. And the last quote I want to read to you is Child Guidance 242. It says, the work of parents is continuous. It should not be laid hold of vigorously for one day and neglected the next. And here is the constant discipline. Many are ready to begin the work. Like today, you may leave this meeting motivated. I must do something. I'm ready to begin this work. But you're not willing to persevere in it. They are eager to do some great thing, to make some great sacrifice, but they shrink from the unceasing care and effort in the little things of everyday life. The hourly pruning, don't do this, don't do that, come here, don't talk to me like this. The hourly pruning and training of the wayward tendencies, the work of giving instruction, reproof, or encouragement, little by little as it's needed. Now, they wish to see children correct their faults and form right characters at once. That's sometimes what I wish. I already told you, why are you still doing this behavior? So you wish to see a transformation at once, reaching the mountaintop at a bound, and not by successive steps. And because their hopes are not immediately realized, they become disheartened. Let all such persons take courage as they remember the words of the apostle. Let us not be weary in well doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. So there is a great prize that you and I will receive if you faint not, even persevering, and in due season, you're going to see that. So walking with God, praying with Him, and your connection with Him through personal devotions is what will strengthen you to be able to survive these emergencies. And I've only seen the little emergencies, 0 to 5 is difficult, but I can only imagine what's from 5 on, because they say raising kids is like playing video games. Every phase gets harder, right? So you moved on from this phase, the next phase is only going to get harder. So I pray this is a blessing to you somehow. I do have some tips, but I'm going to leave that for the band app. I know it's late. People are yawning. I see you, Sarah. And I know that the Lord will teach us individually. I wish it was a one size fits all. If the Lord was to just give us a one size fits all, but not even in the same home, it's like that. Like everything I did with my one child, I've realized now it doesn't always work with my second child. I have to think of new strategies. I have to ask the Lord for new ideas and more wisdom, because aside from being more difficult, she's just different. And so the Lord knows and He knows the desires of each one of our hearts. So I pray that you may read this book. Actually, this is my prayer for you tonight, that you will take time to read or listen to this book. I think it was already sent here on the comments. I can't see the chat. I will post it in the BNF, New Motivations. Okay.
I already sent the link, Dani.
You sent the link. I have,
Yeah.
actually, I'm gonna get it here now because I know there's people here that are not on the Band app. I have the audiobook and I have the written book. And if there are any questions, any comments, you're free to do so. If anybody needs to leave, we also understand and will continue to love you. I'm sorry for talking so long. I really, really, really try to make this short, but it's just, I told Kelly, pray for me. I'll try to keep it under 4 hours. So I did pretty good. I kept it under 2.